What does the term satanic mean? A quick search on the internet reveals characteristic of or befitting Satan, extremely wicked, devil-like, or diabolical. Synonyms for satanic include infernal, fiendish, hellish, devilish, evil, of or relating to Satanism. Another definition of satanic is a highly diverse group of religious, philosophical, or counterculture practices centered around Satan. Now the question that falls to us is, if there is an organization or cult that is extremely wicked or guilty of performing evil acts, does it matter if they have anything to do with Satan or religion in general? Shouldn't we, as a society, strive to put a stop to this illegal activity, especially if the harm is falling primarily on innocent children?
There have been reports of strange creatures in the area.
Witnesses say they couldn't believe what they were seeing.
What is that? Welcome, beloved fofers, doubters, naysayers, non-believers, and skeptics. Welcome to Paranormal Fable or Fact. I am Victor Trevino, joined by my co-host and beautiful wife, Tammy.
We are your humble guides to tales of alleged hoaxes, unbelievable stories, and the overall strange.
Sweet. We gotta mention the already. The email is pfableorfact@proton.me. We also have the Facebook page and the YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and like, because we're going to be focusing a little bit more on YouTube, I think. We're getting a better reaction off YouTube than we are anything else, I think.
Okay.
So, now, this show is going to be another one of those shows that we do. It's going to be on trial. Because during my cursory research, I ran across an obscure book because I was doing research on what I think is eventually going to become a larger show. So this is kind of a segue. Because I don't think we could do the larger show just outright because there's so many pieces to it. But it's in regards to the Satanic Panic. Now this book was called Michelle Remembers, and it was published in like 1980. But I kept seeing what made me want to do more research, and I kept saying, oh, it's a debunked book, it's a debunked book. Well, debunked is different from discredited. Discredited is normally what you see, that a book's been discredited, right?
Right.
Because that means they found things in the book that were inaccurate, and that means it's been discredited. Debunked means from page 1 to the last page, everything is false.
Oh, wow.
The entire thing is a lie. That's what debunked means. It means completely proven false. So that
piqued your interest.
Yeah, that raised the hackles, and I started getting a little interested in it. And so this is kind of a segue to the larger show of the Satanic Panic, because I believe the Satanic Panic has been, not only has it been changed from what it originally was, but there's a convoluted effort to make it seem like, oh, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing was going on. That was just mass hysteria and people lying. Nothing to see here. Move along. And when in reality, there were concerns and there was stuff going on.
Yeah.
So this book began, the gist, basically. Let's move on to the gist.
Okay.
And basically, a Dr. Lawrence Pazder began having occasional therapy sessions with a Michelle Smith in 1973, when she was just 19. In 1976, so she's 22 now, she suffered a miscarriage, which led to her fighting depression, understandably.
Right.
So she began seeking therapy on a more regular basis with Dr. Pazder. During one of these sessions, all of a sudden, she just broke down and started screaming hysterically and allegedly she couldn't be calmed down for like an hour or something. So after he managed to calm her down, she started speaking in a, quote, 5-year-old's voice. I don't know how, I would say maybe a child's voice.
Yeah, how do you know
Very
it's an
high-pitched.
actual 5? Like,
Right, but that's what what I saw said. And again, that might be an attempt to debunk it or whatever. Because remember, the debunkers were all over this book. Anyway, it was at this time that Dr. Pazder began treating Michelle with hypnotic regression. And she recounted this horrible ritualistic abuse that she suffered at the hands primarily of her mother, who apparently was a member of some type of satanic cult. So he took, I don't remember how many hours he claimed of recordings that he had of her recounting all this stuff, but they basically published a book about it. Everything's fine. November 1st, 1980. And that's basically what the show's about. So the book was called Michelle Remembers, so that's why the show is called Remembering Michelle.
oh, okay.
So let's move on to the rules.
Okie dokie.
Rule number 1, we will never purposefully mislead or report false information ever.
We are not professional podcasters.
You didn't say rule number 2.
Oh. Scratch that. Rule number 2, we are not professional podcasters, broadcasters, or audio editors, so mistakes will happen.
Rule number 3, everyone is entitled to believe what they want and entitled to their own opinions, including us.
Rule number 4, we are offering information and insight as food for thought, not persuasion.
Okay, and there's going to be a disclaimer, because I don't want to, we're not really going to talk about the details of the book. We're only going to talk about the major, I'm going to say, attacks against it, the major claims of debunking, of how they could go around saying the book was debunked. And we're going to keep track, because again, we're putting it on trial. Now remember, that means the book is innocent until proven guilty. That means they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt of what they're saying, that basically everything in this book is crap and made up and a complete lie.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's the other thing I forgot to say. This book was claimed to be the flagship. This was the starting point of the entire Satanic Panic, and I think there's a reason for that. We're not going to go into it now because it's an inarguable truth later. But anyway, moving on with the disclaimer, I don't want to go into details because there was some horrific things going on when she was only 5, because this allegedly happened when she was just 5 years old. So because of a younger audience, I don't want to go too much into detail. I just want to say that she was allegedly abused in every way possible that a child can be abused, and we'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
We're not really trying to claim... Can't speak English for some reason. We're not trying to prove her claims of the SRA, which is the abbreviation of Satanic Ritual Abuse. And that's important because we're going to be referring to that throughout the show. SRA, Satanic Ritual Abuse. We're not trying to prove her claims, whether the claims of SRA were true or not. We're mostly pointing out the effort and lengths they went to try to disprove this book. I found a quote because I thought to myself as I was doing my research, I'm like, well, what? Because to me, some religions are cultish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see that.
Some of the more prominent ones.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not going to say, I don't want to get
No.
political or anything, but so I'm not going to name any of them, but in my opinion, some of them are. So I found this post by a guy named Eduardo Marquez Calado, who claimed he was a victim of being sucked into a cult, or almost sucked into a cult. And his first definition I thought was the best, so I just kind of left the rest of them out because he had like 3 or 4 examples of what the difference between a cult and a church is. But his main first point was cults are easy to enter, but hard to leave. Most cults are showy, flashy, and have a ton of PR, outward advertising, even if they want to give themselves some kind of a mysterious aura. They make the admission process as easy and painless as possible, complete with a regular showering of acceptance and over-enthusiastic praise for the newcomers. However, should you ever want to get out, you will be pressed, cajoled, threatened, and even blackmailed into staying. That's the difference, in case anybody was wondering.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I just thought that was a pretty good, that's why I put it in there. And I just said his name because I wanted to give him, good old Eduardo, his due, that he's the one that came up with that definition. And I think it was just a post on one of those chat rooms that I like frequenting. I showed you that one that I...
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on with the red flags, the very first one is the fact that the book was labeled debunked, which is what I told you immediately caught my attention because you don't see that very often. Normally you see discredited, a largely discredited book or a discredited book.
Or not authorized or something, right?
You don't say debunked because when you, like for example, when they say the Amityville Horror was debunked, they're talking about the whole case was largely debunked. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that was also false because we proved on our first episode, we proved that most of those claims were completely crap and didn't have any standing of proving anything, which is exactly what we're going to do with this book. They should have said discredited. You can't say that the entire book from start to finish was debunked unless you're saying the entire thing is false. So right there, keeping score, it's Michelle remembers 1, debunkers nothing. You already lost. You're already losing. The flagship of the entire Satanic Panic was set forth by the New York Times. Now, if you read the New York Times, I don't want to get too political, but it's a rag. It's political hackness. Well, most publications, like it's mainstream media, so most of them are just political and politically driven, and they're hacks. They're not doing real stories. So the fact that this claim of it being the flagship of the whole Satanic Panic immediately raised the hackles, because what does the New York Times know about something that happened in Canada and a book that was released, in Canada primarily?
Yeah.
What is the New York Times doing setting this precedence? Some people might say, well, they're journalists, they can set whatever. But what kind of evidence do you have that it was the actual flagship? We were talking about almost 40 years ago now. Well, yeah, almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So, what are you talking about?
Right.
So, to me, the fact that the rag, the New York Times, had anything to do with it immediately makes me go and roll my eyes, because it's like CNN coming out and saying something about it. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't believe anything you're going to say, because you always have to double check when one of these, when the mainstream media is involved. You have to check alternative sources of news, because their main agenda is to curb public opinion, not report the news. In my humble opinion, of course. I don't want to get too political, but anyway, moving on. So that's 2-0 right there. Mm-hmm. Okay. This is one for the skeptics.
Okay.
Because hypnotic regression and recovered memory therapy are not accepted forms of therapy or treatment. So the fact that Dr. Pazder used that to get all of this stuff that he claims happened to poor little Michelle when she was 5 can be largely completely ignored. Okay? And that's the only thing that I can see that they can make the claim that the book was debunked, because most of the evidence from the book was based on
the therapy.
Hypnotic regression. But there's stuff in the book that's not for example, the fact that she claimed she was 5 at one point. You can't say, no, she was never 5.
Yeah.
The fact of the town that she grew up in, no, she never grew up in that town. Do you see what I mean? The detail, the fact that he was her therapist, that he started treating her in 1973, all of these things can be proven. So again, to make the claim that the entire book was debunked is false. It's just false. So this makes it 2-1.
Okay.
The skeptics actually get a point for this, because that is a legitimate complaint and a legitimate attack against the book, or claims that the book makes. Some of the claims. The next red flag, the acronym SRA, which is Satanic Ritual Abuse, it isn't any different from any ritualistic or organized abuse, like child trafficking, child pornography, or child exploitation. So it shouldn't be defended as such. And I don't want to go into any more detail on that, because we're going to cover it in Inarguable Truth number 7 according to my notes. So that's 3-1 already. Now here's another claim that I saw. They claim that it was a bestseller, and that's why it was the flagship, because it affected millions of readers. I couldn't find it on any bestseller list. I checked, because it was published in 1980, I checked the bestseller list on 1978, 1979, just in case they got the date wrong, 1980, 1981, 1982. I was finding out all kinds of books. For example, in 1979, the bestseller, number one bestseller under horror, because this would have been under horror. And don't think that I just looked at the horror list. I also looked at all the bestseller lists, and they weren't on there. But just to make sure that maybe it wasn't pigeonholed,
Yeah.
I also checked the horror list. It wasn't on there. In 1979, The Legacy by John Coyne was number one. That was the number one bestseller. In 1980, Firestarter by, a little-known author named Stephen King, maybe, was the number one bestseller. In 1981, another little-known writer named V.C. Andrews came out with If There Be Thorns. That was 1981. The Uninvited in 1983 was by William Johnstone, etc., etc. I could not find it on any bestseller list. Now, why is that a red flag? Well, because if you're going to say that this book was so influential, that it was the flagship of the whole Satanic Panic, womp womp, you're falling short. Because it's not a bestseller. In other words, hardly anybody read it. In fact, baby, I would like to take this opportunity to beseech you and ask, have you ever heard of Michelle Remembers?
No.
I can't say I have either. Never even heard of it before I started doing this research.
But I've heard of every book
Every book on that list.
that you just listed.
Exactly.
Every book.
Every single book we
Haven't
know.
read them all, but
And
I
I don't
know
want
what
to.
they are.
I don't want to go into too much detail because again, we're going to cover this in our arguable truth number 5.
Okay.
But that is the point. It was claimed to be a bestseller. That's why they attacked it with such vehemence. Because millions of people were reading this garbage, this lie. But it wasn't on any bestseller list. That's a lie.
Yeah. Interesting.
Score, Michelle Remembers 4, Debunkers 1. Again, moving forward with that, this desperate claim that this book caused a wildfire was what I read in some of the headlines, It caused a wildfire of the Satanic Panic. Obviously, that's exaggerated. Because how could an unknown, unpopular book be so devastating and influence so many people when nobody read it? Nobody heard about it.
Right.
So do you see what I mean? It's like this false building up of it, making it like it's more important than it is. And that's why that's a red flag. Now, that's not really an attack or anything. That's just an observation of mine.
Right.
And it raised the hackles because I kept reading all these headlines. In fact, I don't want to say anything because, it's the very next point. It's the very next point. A quick Google search. I'm telling you, baby, all I did was typed in satanic cases in Victoria, Canada. And it was very telling. As soon as I typed that in, boom, all these references to Michelle Remembers. Debunked book. False claims of, all this. There's never been anything like this. All the claims of this book, this flagship. You got to check out this book. They claim this is proof that the Satanic Panic exists. And I'm like, really? All I'm trying to do is look for a arbitrary search. And again, you could say, I could actually claim Google is part of the mainstream media because they keep doing stuff. Like, how many shows have we had where I do a Google search and it's obviously tampered with and formed, set up to where you're funneled into this, only searching certain things when it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be a search engine. When you type something in, it's supposed to take you to what you're typing for. Because guarantee you, when you type Michelle Remembers, it's not, when you vice versa it, it's not going to tell you Satanism cases in Victoria, Canada. It's not going to come up like that. Do you see what I mean? So you can't even argue that, maybe it's just the algorithm or whatever. No. It is a purposefully formed search to where you're only going to find certain things and not going to be able to do your own research. It's a roadblock, basically.
Okay.
So that to me is very telling. The book automatically pops up. Only if you use the keyword Satanism. But if you type in cultist stuff in Vancouver, Canada, or Victoria, Canada, sorry, everything pops up normal. You can research all kinds of stuff. So as long, and again, this is why I made that point, SRA, the satanic ritual abuse, it's the same thing. So what are we talking about? But as long as you don't say satanic, perfectly fine. You can search all you want for cults. You can search all you want for child abuse. You can search all you want for that stuff in Victoria, Canada. As long as you don't say the keyword Satanism. Ding, 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 ding. To me, that is very telling.
Yeah, that is
very telling. Score 5-1. And we're going to go into more detail in arguable truth number 6, according to my notes. So I am not going to go too into it. When you look into cultism claims and reports, I kept running into these ambiguous references. All these blogs and all of these pieces, these journal pieces and all of these reports, including things that I read from like rags, like the New York Times and stuff, which I kind of try to stay away from, like the Guardian and the bigger journalist groups, because they're mainstream media, and I try to get the more smaller independent stuff, because that's when you're going to find your truth. Or independent people, because they're going to do their own research and you're going to find out stuff. I don't want to read what a journalist has to say, because 9 times out of 10, again, they're politically motivated. So I kept seeing these vague references being used to quote-unquote debunk the book, like many child experts believe. Well, what is that?
Yeah.
What kind of argument is that? That would never stand up in court. You couldn't say it. Yes, Your Honor, many child experts believe. And that's how you're going to start your argument. You would get shot to pieces. You would get ripped to shreds. But no, this is the kind of terminology that you read when you're looking into this stuff. And again, that raised the huckles. Red flags started shooting up, all over the place. And I started digging deeper. If you repeat something enough time, we've talked about this before, the headlines, because that's all they're trying to do.
Right.
In my opinion, when you're using stuff like this, many child experts believe. If you repeat something in newspapers, magazines, broadcasts, and other media enough, it starts to become true. People start to read it. In fact, I'll go into that a little later, but they're going for the headlines. Again, that raises the hackles, because if you're using these vague terms, Google is funneling you into a fixed search so that you can only see certain things. And you have the mainstream media, including the New York Times, making these vast claims with no proof to them.
So it's like one-sided.
Extremely one-sided, and it seems to be a collusion of the mainstream media and all of their cohorts going out there, their little debunkers, debunking 101, our friends over at Debunkers R Us, going out there and making all these references to the Satanic Panic, because that's the whole push, baby. This book was a chess piece to maneuver their, in my opinion, a strategic piece to move to prove their claim of the Satanic Panic. Nothing to see here, folks. It was all a panic. People were lying. They didn't know what they were talking about. Kids that were being under SRA, satanic ritual abuse, they weren't being abused by Satanists. They were just being abused. Oh, so that makes it good. That makes it okay.
Yeah.
As long as you don't say Satanism, remember, perfectly okay. That raises my hackles. Oh, there you go, God boy. I just knew it. You just gotta make your sermon, don't you? Yeah, whatever. Just take it easy. There whines a lot. Mm-hmm. But I think the point is sound. If you repeat the lie enough times, it starts to become true because, again, I have proof of that, and I'll talk about it later. For example, the claim that there has never been any arrests for Satanism in Victoria, British Columbia, as though that's proof. So there's never been any child molesters. There's never been any organized crime. There's never been any organizations that exploited children. Nothing. Because remember, as long as it's not satanic, that's the key word. Do you see what I mean? There's never been any cults in Victoria, British Columbia.
Yeah.
Lies. Of course there have. But there's never been any Satanism or proven Satanism. So they're saying that's proof. See, she was lying. Michelle remembers, it's a bunch of BS. That's not proof, because if there's still cultist activity, for example, if they worship the god of death, the Egyptian god of death, Set, for example, and they're Satanists, they're still a cult, and they're still hurting people. So what proof is that if you make that claim? Yeah, we don't have any records of any Satanists being, so that means all their claims are false. So no children have ever been hurt. No people have ever been human trafficked.
Yeah.
There's never been any sexual offenses against anybody in Victoria, British Columbia, really? That's your argument? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see it.
Red flag. Red flag, huge falsehood. And that's it falls short of proof. 7-1 is the score.
All right.
Oh, and here's what I was talking about. If you repeat a lie enough, it starts to become true. I looked at the book reviews. I went on different sites where you can buy books, where you can purchase books, and looked up Michelle Remembers. Mm-hmm. And the book reviews, these are readers. These aren't anybody associated with the mainstream media, nobody. The readers' reviews were very telling. Very telling. The people that read it, the first thing they said, they were shocked that this could be the flagship of the Satanic Panic. Ding, 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 ding. I totally agree with them. This is why we're doing this show. This is why we're doing this episode. Because how could it be? And they're all saying it was outlandish. It was poorly written. It wasn't really, it wasn't anything like they were making it seem like it was this huge thing. And they're like, really? This isn't a very good book. Not even talking about all the claims. It just wasn't a very good book, which is why it wasn't a bestseller, which is why it's a red flag of this colluded attack against it. Why? But again, that to me, so people were reading this book simply because of the claims that it was the flagship to the Satanic Panic. So again, if you repeat a lie enough, it starts to become true. People start to believe it, and the book reviews were evidence of that. Now, here's where we start getting into debunking the actual attacks against the book. Apparently, after the book was published and started to be attacked, according to the debunkers, I have evidence to say that might even be a lie, that all of this debunking happened in 1980 when it first came out. I don't think it did. I think all of that's a fabrication. And we'll talk about that later. But according to the debunkers, once the book came out and they rushed over to interview her because this book was affecting millions of people and they couldn't stand by and watch all these innocent people get, affected by these lies, the interviewers claimed Michelle didn't want to do interviews. So they went back and said, that's proof she's lying. Why wouldn't you want to defend yourself? Really? What kind of weak attack is... that shows that the book's debunked because she didn't want to do interviews afterwards?
Yeah, maybe she didn't want to do it.
Maybe she didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a traumatic time in her life.
Yeah. She wanted to move on.
Thank you very much. Plus, they made this whole effort to put the book out, and again, it didn't do very well. It wasn't very successful. The money and time that it took for them to publish it, they probably barely broke even, because I think they got awarded like $100,000 and they went across the country trying to promote it. Just because she doesn't want to give interviews, that's your evidence that she's lying? Really? What happened to innocent till proven guilty, right?
Yeah.
So to me, Michelle remembers 9, debunkers 1. In October, here's another thing, baby. Remember, the book was published November 1st, 1980, right?
Yeah.
In October 27th of 1980, an article came out in the magazine called Maclean's. Paul Gresco, supposedly, and I don't even know if this is true or not, because I think I tried to find it and I couldn't. Oh no, I did find it. That's right, I did. He apparently interviewed, now remember, this is 4 days before the book was published, because the book was published November 1st, 1980, right?
Right.
October 27th, in a magazine called Maclean's, Paul Gresco allegedly interviewed Michelle Smith's father, who vehemently denied all allegations against his wife, Virginia Smith, who had passed away in 1964. And he claimed he could refute all the claims in the book. And that's another one of their flags. That's another one of their badges saying that they debunked the book. Okay, so my question would be, again, baby, we're in a courthouse. They have her father on the witness stand, right?
Right.
I can refute every allegation in the book, he says. Really? You just opened up a whole can of worms, buddy, by saying something like that. And the fact that they're willing to use that as evidence that means the book is debunked, weak. That would never stand up in court. You can't just make blanket claims like that without any kind of evidence.
Complete blanket.
Because my first question, as the defense, would be, do we really, and I would be talking to the jury, do we really think that he, as her father, is just going to come out and say, yeah, it's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Everything she said is true. I was there. I wasn't a very good father. Didn't pay attention. My wife was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. She's gone now, but yeah, she was a member of a Satanic. Of course he's not going to do that. Of course he's going to deny.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that even mentioning her father, because I don't think he's mentioned in the book, so how is that evidence? Any kind of evidence that she's lying? Answer, it's not. And that whole blanket claim that he can refute every claim made in the book is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. In fact, moving on to the next red flag, I found out later in another interview that her father admitted that he wasn't a perfect father to the interviewer. He also stated that it was a, quote, difficult marriage. to the esteemed Virginia Smith. I don't want to talk ill about the dead, but apparently, when this McLean's came out, this Paul Gresco claimed that she was just an innocent angel and that Michelle was just this evil person that made up all these lies about her. Well, we don't have any evidence of that. But here is her husband saying that it was an extremely difficult marriage. That, to me, is telling. Does that sound like butterflies and puppies?
No.
If how would you describe our marriage, baby? If you're going to describe your marriage as difficult, that's pretty telling, right?
Yeah, that is.
I mean, let's be honest. But that Michelle was a liar. He did not go against what he first claimed in the other interview. She was lying. Now, I found another interview. And we're going to talk more about this later on in our Arguable Truth number 4, so I'm only going to talk about this as little as possible because we're going to cover it in more detail. One of the attacks against Michelle Remembers was that apparently she talks about this horrible car crash, and in the flames she saw this entity walking through the flames and it scared the crap out of her. And she started screaming, and they said we could find no evidence of an auto accident during that time that she claims. Yay, we win. No, because they interviewed her father. And this is what he had to say, quote, "What I do recall was us coming across a fatal car crash in our car. We saw 2 cars smashed together, and a woman was lying in the road bleeding to death. Her intestines were hanging out, and it was a horrible sight. Michelle started to scream, and we could not stop her for ages." Unquote. So her own father remembers this fictitious accident that Michelle just made up in that debunked book. Her own father remembers it. And remember, his claims is that she's a liar.
Right. But he remembers the accident.
But he remembers the accident she's talking about. So,
which obviously, really
would be
scarred
traumatic.
her. Yeah, it was traumatic
right.
to her.
And that's why it was mentioned in the book in that 5-year-old's voice, because she remembers that when she was a little girl. It affected her. It affected her future. And again, to me, that's a perfectly good reason for not wanting to be interviewed and talk about that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Going back to that other thing, well, she's not giving interviews, so she's lying. Okay, whatever. 11-1, baby.
Okay.
Because that completely debunks that claim that, we couldn't find any evidence of this accident. Her own father said that there was an accident that traumatized her. Moving on, because we're just knocking them out of the park.
Yeah, we are.
Dr. Pazder and Michelle divorced their spouses, and getting married isn't an argument that she's lying, because apparently he had divorced his wife years after
They married each other?
They married each other, Dr.
Oh.
Pazder and Michelle.
Oh.
But again, we're talking about Stan Friedman's rules for debunkers number 3. Rule number 3, if you can't attack the data, attack the people, and that's exactly what they're doing. What difference does it make that they later divorced their spouses and got married? How is that any evidence that the book was debunked or the book was completely made up? Honestly.
Yeah, I don't know.
It has nothing to do with the claims. It has nothing to do with their therapy. We don't know any details. All we know is that they're now married, and they have been married, apparently. I think he passed away, actually.
Dr. Lawrence Pazder passed away on March 5, 2004.
But they were married. Who cares? Do you know when they were married? Did one of their spouses pass away?
Right.
Do we know any details? So this blanket claim that, they got married together. They left their spouses and got married together. That means they're liars. Really? Falls short.
Yeah.
In my humble opinion. That is absolutely evidence of debunking.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not evidence that they're lying or that the book was false. Moving on. They interviewed Michelle's first husband. Now, here's the guy that she divorced to marry Dr. Pazder. He was extremely bitter and claimed that she never mentioned anything about ritualistic abuse when she was a child. So there they go. More evidence Michelle's lying. She didn't even talk to her husband about it. Proof right there. Dead on. Everybody go home. We have evidence. She's lying. She didn't even talk to her husband about it. Have you ever heard of a little thing, baby? Again, we're in court. And if this was the argument of the prosecution, my question would be, have you ever heard of anything called patient-doctor privilege?
Yeah. Well, maybe she didn't want to tell her first husband.
But that's it. Argument over.
Yeah.
It's patient-doctor privilege. The doctor can't talk about it, and neither she's under no obligation to talk about it.
No.
Even in court, even under oath, she is not obligated to talk about it. That is the secrecy privilege. And that exists between spouses. Just like with spouses, if I tell you something in confidence, they can't bring you up it's the marriage.
Yeah.
What is it called? I can't remember what it's
I
called.
can't either, but
But basically, that you can't pit spouses against each other.
Right.
If you tell me something in confidence, we have that protection.
Right.
Spousal privilege, also known as marital privilege, is a legal principle that protects the confidentiality of communications between spouses. It's a right that prevents a spouse from being forced to testify against their spouse in court.
So, same thing here. It's a doctor-patient privilege. So what are you talking about? How is that evidence that she's lying just because her bitter husband that she divorced, him saying that she never mentioned it, oh, that's it, we're going home now, we just proved she's lying. What? No. Settle down. Just settle down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But again, these weak attacks, and this is all the claims that the book is a lie, baby.
Yeah.
This is their evidence, because I looked into it. Does this sound like a debunked book to you?
No.
Because so far it's score 13-1. So moving on. The position of authority argument. This was another argument against the book. Since there is no such thing as Satan or hell, the book has to be a lie. That position of authority argument falls short. You would never be able to use that in court, because again, it's a position of authority. Remember, baby, that's why we do the inarguable truths, right? Because what's factual to us might not be factual to other people. We believe in God. That's fact to us. The existence of God is fact. But to somebody else that doesn't believe in God, it's not fact. So we can't say it's a fact that this. Can't say that, because that's from arguing from a position of authority. So this jackass, whatever skeptic came up with this idiotic argument that, well, since there is no Satan or hell, she has to be lying. Why is anybody even reading this book? Because it's a lie. In fact, I looked up stats in Canada, our buddies up in Canada, the Canadians. 53% of the population in Canada is religious.
That's a big percentage.
53%. So your argument, that argument, falls on deaf ears to 53% of the population. How would you even begin to make that an argument in court?
Yeah, you couldn't.
Couldn't do it.
No, you couldn't.
It's an argument for position of authority. That's why you can't say that. And that, again, that's one of the red flags. That was one of their big arguments.
Yeah.
She's lying because there is no such thing as it, because she was claiming that she was seeing demons and all kinds of stuff. Again, I don't want to go into the claims of the book, but that argument falls short. How do you even use that as evidence that she's lying?
Right.
You can't. So score 14-1. Now we're getting into the inarguable truths. So, and there's 7, baby.
Okie dokie.
Inarguable truth number 1.
You don't threaten to sue for libel after something is already published.
Inarguable truth number 2.
Oprah Winfrey presented the experiences of this case and others as factual in 1989.
Inarguable truth number 3.
Kindergarten is not mandatory until the age of 6 in Victoria, Canada.
Inarguable truth number 4.
The argument of a local paper reporting, quote, all auto accidents, unquote, would never hold up in court.
Inarguable truth number 5.
Why go through all this trouble to disprove such an unpopular book?
Inarguable truth number 6.
There is evidence of possible organized satanic activity today.
Inarguable truth number 7.
Whether SRA or not, child abuse / exploitation is still a serious problem. Okay, so let's go back to inarguable truth number 1. You don't threaten to sue for libel after something's already been published. Another one of the attacks against the book was that, and I saw it in several different places, including Wikipedia, was the claim that Dr. Pazder backed down from Anton LaVey. You remember who Anton LaVey is, right? He was the president of the Church of Satan. He's the one that wrote the book and all that way back when, in the 70s or something.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I
don't even know if his church still exists. I think it does. I think there are still members of it, but it's not a very, well, from what I know, it's not a very big church. But I don't even want to go into it. Basically, the claims were that Anton LaVey called out Dr. Pazder and threatened to sue him for libel. And they said Pazder backed down from him. That was the claim. What? Why would he have to back down? Well, go ahead and sue. You're going to have to, because if he did, they would have to unpublish the book or make corrections. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what happens when you sue for libel. And he would have to reimburse Anton LaVey for this false claim that the Church of Satan were the people involved in what Michelle was claiming.
Right.
But I don't know if he actually, because I think he actually used the term Church of Satan, which ticked off Anton LaVey, obviously. But the fact that he backed down,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
Yeah.
The book's still out there.
So where's the evidence?
It's still published.
Yeah.
He didn't make any changes. It still claims the Church of Satan. Wasn't revised.
Okay.
So what are you talking about, quote, back down, unquote? What? Also, the book was already published when LaVey allegedly confronted Pastor. And that's what the inarguable truth is. So if it's already out there and people are already reading it, why would you even bother saying, hey, if you don't take that down, I'm going to sue you? What? We're talking years after it was published, baby.
Oh, okay.
Not when it first came out. We're talking years later.
Oh,
so why would he even bother? So to me, that whole thing is made up. But again, that's their proof that she's lying. Michelle remembers 15, debunkers 1. Because that makes no sense. The inarguable truth is sound. You don't threaten to sue for libel after something's already been published. You would sue.
Right.
You wouldn't threaten to sue. What's the point? Moving on, I don't even want to go into that. Moving on to number 2, because I think that was thorough. We just thoroughly destroyed that whole argument.
Yeah.
Moving on to number 2, and this is a huge one, baby, and this is the one I was talking about, that I think all the claims of debunking going on back when the book first came out, besides that one article that I found in 1980, that was 4 days before the book came out, that was the only one I could reference where they had evidence that the book was being attacked right when it came out or right before it came out, which is stunning to me. How do you do something 4 days before something's even published? How do you even know to interview her dad? How do you even know who her dad is?
Oh, I don't know.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know.
If you're interviewing her father, you did the research, you found out where her father lives, and you go and interview him 4 days before the book's even published? I don't know if that happens a lot. Doesn't sound sounds very, as the young people say nowadays, sus to me, right?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about publishing, so I don't know.
How would you even before
if they had agents or I don't know.
Or maybe they did a sneak peek or something.
Maybe. Yeah.
That's the only way to even explain it.
Or they were going around advertising or whatever it's called. What is it called when they?
Yeah, they advertise before it's published. Yeah, I don't know what that's called. I forget
what it's called. They do it for movies and books and all that.
Yeah, they promote it.
There you go, promotions.
Yeah. Maybe it was a promotion, but how would they know who her father was? And even if they did, how do they know what she alleged? I mean, she might have made reference to it, but that's why I didn't put that as a red flag. But it's just something that kind of struck me. How did they do it 4 days before it was even published? Maybe it's a common thing. I don't know. But let's move on.
Okay.
But the fact of the matter is, I believe that was the only attempt to attack the book back then because there's zero evidence otherwise. Because nearly 10 years after the book came out, I think this was like in September or October of 1989, was Oprah's show, Oprah Winfrey. You know, little unknown #1 talk show in the nation for like 10 years straight or something back then.
Yeah.
In the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
She had Michelle and Dr. Pastor on her show, and she presented their claims as true. They were legitimate. They were factual. She had all kinds of experts. The book was vetted. These people were interviewed prior to coming on the show. A big show like that's not going to bring on a bunch of kooks. You know what I'm saying? I mean, maybe you could find evidence that Oprah did have kooks on her show, but these people were not one of them, obviously, because almost 10 years after the book was published, Oprah Winfrey had him in her show. She had him on their show. If the book was debunked in 1980, baby, why would Oprah bother?
Yeah.
You're going to bring somebody on your show that has a debunked book?
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To me, that's evidence that they didn't attack the book until after Oprah Winfrey had them on her show, because that would have affected millions of audience, because she had millions of viewers. Probably tens of millions.
Yeah.
Remember how big her show was back in the day?
Her show was huge.
So, to me, they didn't truly start all these attacks that we're talking about now until after 1989, after she came out on Oprah Winfrey.
Huh. Interesting.
in my opinion. I don't have any proof of that. But I couldn't find any other dates, baby. All of these claims were just these random kind of dumb attacks that we just totally trashed, right?
Yeah.
And the only one that I could find that had a date on it was that McLean's, that interview in McLean's where they interviewed her father. All the other interviews were way after the book was already published, like up to a year after, or sometimes even further than that. So I think the book wasn't truly attacked until after the Oprah Winfrey show, because otherwise Oprah Winfrey would have never had them on the show if they were already proven to be, debunked.
Right.
So that's 16-1. I think we're pretty much innocent until proven guilty at this point, right?
Yeah.
But we're not even done. Moving on. Inarguable truth number 3, which is kindergarten is not mandatory until the age of 6 in Victoria, Canada. Again, this is a huge one, baby, because the big claim, one of their smoking guns that they claimed that she was lying, is because they actually went around to all the local elementary schools where she lived and were asking for teachers and students. Of course, this was back in 1954, baby. So even if they did this back in the early 80s when the book first came out, you're talking 30 years after, because she was 5 in 1954 and 1955. Remember, in 1970...
Why would they even do that?
That's what I'm saying.
Why would they even do that? That doesn't make any sense.
That's inarguable truth number 5, baby. You're going ahead of yourself.
Sorry.
Why go through all this trouble to disprove this unpopular book? Exactly. But they actually did, baby. They actually went to local elementary schools looking for any teachers or students, and they claimed since they couldn't find anybody, because Michelle said that she was locked in a cage for a month. Again, I don't want to go into detail, but she said that they were abusing her for over a month. So they asked people, and they couldn't find anybody that remembered anything about Michelle missing school for up to a month. Well, what did we claim at the beginning of the show, baby? She was 5.
Yeah, she was 5.
Inarguable truth number 3, kindergarten is not mandatory until the age of 6. So her mother could have easily kept her home from school for a month, and there would be no school records of it, because it's not mandatory for her to attend kindergarten.
Yeah. Interesting.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So where
What a waste of time.
Where's your smoking gun, though, baby?
It's not there.
It falls short. It just, just completely goes a limp one.
It's a rubber band gun.
It's a... Exactly. It's not a smoking gun. It's a squirt gun.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense. But yet that's what they posted. We went around to her schools and nobody could remember her missing a month. Really?
Yeah.
Really? That's your... And again, and baby, it was just cursory research. I just looked up the law. Is it mandatory? And to this day, I believe it's still not mandatory until age 6. So her mother could have kept her out for the entire year.
Right.
That she was 5, and nobody would have blinked an eye. Not an eye would have been batted. So moving on, inarguable truth number 4, the argument of a local paper reporting, quote, all auto accidents, unquote, would never hold up in court. Now remember, her father already said that there was a car accident. So it's already been blown out of the water, but I wasn't done.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's a stupid argument.
Right.
The claim was they found a local paper that, quote, reported all accidents in the area, unquote. And they couldn't find any evidence of the automobile accident that Michelle claims in the book. And that was their proof that she was lying. How could you prove that in court, baby?
You can't.
How could you prove that a local, now defunct, from what I understand, that local...
Newspaper.
Yeah, the local newspaper. And I also think it was like a little radio station.
Okay.
But I don't think it exists anymore. But how could you possibly prove that they reported, quote, all accident reports and never missed one? So that when Michelle makes her claim, that's proof that she's lying. What?
Well, you can't prove that because, like, what I do in genealogy is I look up a lot of old newspaper articles, and sometimes it's not going to be in there. Mm-hmm. It's frustrating when you don't find it, but I mean that's just like obituaries. They're not all going to be in there. Everything's not always going to be in the newspapers.
The newspaper isn't omniscient.
No,
they have to be told things. Somebody has to report it.
Exactly.
I remember, baby, when I was in the military, my neighbor ran over another neighbor's mailbox.
Yeah.
Damaged the back of his car and just completely demolished their mailbox. Guy comes out, they're talking, joking, because they're neighbors.
Yeah.
I'll fix your mailbox, man. Sorry. I'll fix my car. It was my stupid fault. Sorry, no harm, no foul. He drove off. MPs were never called.
Yeah.
No accident report was ever filled out.
Yeah.
We're talking about federal property, baby.
Right.
But because it was between neighbors, it wasn't reported.
Right.
So the idea, and that's just a perfect example, the idea that every auto accident is reported
Yeah.
falls short.
Well, it could also be there could have been bigger news, like perfect like I think it was Farrah Fawcett that died the same day Michael Jackson died.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't hear anything about Farrah Fawcett because Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was bigger news, if something happened, bigger news, then it's not going to be in there.
That's also a very good point. But don't forget, baby, her father admitted
That there was an accident.
that he remembers the auto accident she was talking about. So that proves right there that the local paper didn't report, quote, every auto accident that happened in the area.
Right.
There's your evidence right there. He remembered it, but the newspaper didn't.
Right.
So that argument would fall so short in court. I don't even think that the judge would allow that evidence to be presented. He probably would have just thrown it out.
Yeah.
But since he didn't, since we are the defense, now the score is 18-1.
Yeah.
Moving on to inarguable truth number 5, which is the one you were talking about. Why go through all this trouble to disprove such an unpopular book? To answer your question that you started asking, and I said, oh, you're getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
I believe because it's necessary for the headlines. And that's it. That's pretty much what it boils down to. It sets a precedence for the rest of the Satanic Panic being either silly or a complete lie.
Huh. Interesting.
It's a collusion, baby. This is an attempt to try to establish something that is false. And they use this book as the quote-unquote flagship. Because after you hear all this stuff, baby, you just ask the question yourself. I didn't even have to ask it. You said, why would they even bother? Why would they even waste their time doing stuff like that? Exactly. That's inarguable truth number 5. Why bother to go through all that trouble?
Yeah, it's amazing how much stuff they did.
It's ridiculous,
It doesn't
isn't it?
make sense.
It's ridiculous. Moving on. Inarguable truth number 6. There is evidence of possible organized satanic activity today. Now remember, what's the definition of satanic? Devilish, fiendish, evil, wicked. It doesn't have to be an organization. It doesn't have to be the worship of Satan. It's just evil acts, baby.
Yeah.
That was the difference. So the fact that they named it SRA, because see, you have to use cute little acronyms to make it powerful.
Yeah.
Satanic ritual abuse. And as long as there's no evidence of satanic ritual abuse, it's not happening. Well, I argue that's crap.
Yeah.
That is garbage. Because satanic doesn't necessarily mean that it has anything to do with Satan. It's just something of or becoming of Satan. Something evil. Something illegal.
Yeah.
Something that hurts somebody else. Something wicked. Something that we as decent people, not necessarily Christians, just decent people, would say that's wrong.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
Particularly when it comes to harming children, baby.
Right.
How many people are going to argue, no, that's perfectly okay if they're sexually abusing children. Yeah, we're perfectly fine with that. Not very many.
No.
Very small percentage of the population. I'm sure there are people that would. Very small percentage of the population. So again, does it matter if it's actually satanic or not? It only matters if it's evil, if it's wicked, fiendish, etc., etc.
Right.
So why is that term satanic the key word? Why is Google funneling it down?
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Moving on to evidence that there is possible organized activity today. We know about P. Diddy Combs,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
The former Abercrombie and Fitch CEO Mike Jeffries was charged with human trafficking / child exploitation. Nixium with Allison Mack, who was the actress of Smallville. She was sentenced to 21 months in prison because she was actively recruiting people into these, human trafficking stuff.
Right.
And they were exploiting people and forcing them to do slave labor and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
This happened. This is Hollywood, baby.
Yeah.
R. Kelly was arrested for human trafficking.
Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein was arrested for all these horrible allegations of abusing young girls and abusing young women. Everybody knows about Jeffrey Epstein's island.
Yeah.
Should I go on? The list goes on, baby.
Yeah.
Celebrities publicly engaging in and speaking of Satanism. You can go online right now, baby. There are numerous members of pop culture that have said, yes, I sold my soul to Satan.
Yeah.
Some of them saying, hail Satan, all this stuff. So the idea that it's just this panic and nobody's seeing anything and nothing to see here, folks, what are you talking about? Oh, come on, God boy. You Christians see the devil behind every palm tree. Whatever. There's evidence. Period. It's inarguable.
Well, even if, like, you don't want to say the satanic part, it's still evil. All the people that you listed have done evil things.
Horrible things.
Horrible.
To other human beings.
Evil things.
Exactly.
And it's just, that's what it is.
And the point is it's happening right now. You can't ignore evidence. It's happening right now. And the reason most of these people got away with it for years, some of them, maybe decades, some of them, was because of there was an organized effort to keep it hushed.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what I'm alleging for this Satanic Panic. It is an organized attempt to hush it, to keep it under wraps, to make it to that the public doesn't understand that there are organizations out there that are harming not only children, but young, inexperienced girls, and even adults, grown adults, young people.
Boys too.
Yeah. Moving on to inarguable truth number 7. And we already kind of talked about this. Yeah. Whether it's satanic ritualistic abuse or not, child abuse / exploitation is still a serious problem. Is anybody going to argue against that? No. As long as the abuse is not ritualistic, it's okay?
No, it's not.
So even though I don't want to use the term because it's their cute acronym that they're trying to put out there to make it sound like it's more important than it is, let's just take away satanic ritualistic abuse. Let's say evil ritualistic abuse, or evil organized abuse, or fiendish organized abuse.
Yeah, that makes it
or
sound
evil
terrible.
Organized abuse.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
It just makes it uglier to say it that way.
The idea that just because there's no evidence of Satanism that, these kids were lying, because when we do the show on the Satanic Panic, baby, that's the main claim. That all these kids were lying against innocent adults and having them thrown and charged with all these crimes, and the kids were proven to be lying. And we can't have kids in court anymore testifying. Really?
Wow.
That's your argument, really?
Yeah, that's crazy.
When, in fact, almost every single case, just like this one, baby, almost every single case, those clowns are arguing that the Satanic Panic is true. Every case that they allege, people were actually arrested for abusing children. Their only defense is that there was no Satanism involved. So that's why I ask, does it matter? Evil is evil.
Yeah, evil's evil.
We're talking about semantics.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, pretty much.
And again, the question, should we be so quick to assume children are lying when actual abuse is occurring? Because we watched that show on Netflix. Remember, baby, it happened in London?
Yeah.
And that lawyer went up there and was interviewing the kids, and he, quote, proved that they were lying about these innocent adults because he was so big and he intimidated these poor 7-year-olds on the stand. You've seen what a lawyer can do to an adult, baby. Yeah. Just imagine what a good, aggressive lawyer could do to a child. Yeah. Exactly. Terrible. And that's your evidence that the kids were lying? Thank you very much. Mic drop.
Yeah.
So, that pretty much does it, baby.
Okay.
In conclusion, baby, what do you think about Michelle Remembers?
I don't like this show.
Okay.
It's gotta be a true book. I don't know. I'm so confused. But I can tell you today, there is evilness around us. Mm-hmm. And if all this happened to this poor girl, that's sad. So evil is around us. And that's all I have to say about that.
When I first started doing research into this, I thought, because there's so many organizations, baby, for human trafficking and child exploitation today, not just in America, in the UK, in Australia, all over the world.
Right.
In Canada.
Right.
They even made a movie about it recently. Remember that movie where they were bringing in girls through Mexico and stuff like this?
Yes.
Children. The reason they're doing it is because it's actually happening all around us. So does it matter if it has to do with Satanism or not? There's kids being trafficked. But going back to my point, my original point was, when I first started doing the research into this, I thought child exploitation was the poor kid handcuffed to, a water heater in some cold, dank cellar.
Right.
It's not what it is. These kids are urged and tempted into houses, and we'll go into this in more detail when we get into the Satanic Panic thing of this organized stuff that's happening. They basically have houses set up, and there's books written on this, people that went through this, where they have pizza served every couple hours, freezers full of ice cream, widescreen TVs in every room, adults there that are willing to do these kids' homework for them, and they have every single video game console that you can possibly think of, and every single game that you can possibly think of. Computer games, everything. So these young kids show up there.
Because the temptation is great.
Their parents are working, they're hardworking people, both of them are at work. The kid normally is supposed to stay home by themselves, and these kids go over to these houses, and they're groomed, they're tempted, they're offered alcohol. No pressure. Oh, do you want to try a cigarette? Do you want to try some weed? Oh, we got some coke over here. You want to try that? Oh, it's really cool. It'll make you feel so good. But there's no pressure. Never any pressure. And again, even with the sex, they're tempted with sex. Because again, when I started doing research on this, I thought child pornography, and I don't want to get too vulgar on it, but I thought child pornography was some piece of crap harming a kid and filming it, right? That's not what the majority of child pornography is. Child pornography is exactly that. It's kids harming each other. That's what it is. And the way they do it is at these temptation houses. This is what we're talking about. This is what we're up against. This is what they're trying to cover up. And you can do your own research on this, and you can send me emails and say I'm just talking out my butt or whatever, I'm making all this up, oh God, boy, you're just trying to push Jesus or whatever. No, this is a serious problem. And I don't care if it has anything to do with religion, Satan, devils, demons. I don't care.
It's just evil.
It's just evil, and something needs to be done about it. Don't ignore the little man behind the curtain. Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's evidence.
Yeah.
And this book, Michelle remembers, being, quote, the debunked book, unquote, is proof that they're lying. They're lying and they're trying to cover things up. Because again, why even bother?
Yeah.
To me, that's evidence of collusion. That is evidence of organization. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Which is exactly what this whole show's about. Which is exactly what they're telling us doesn't exist. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for your continued support. Sorry the show was kind of dark and kind of gloomy, but I couldn't help it. This is just stuff that I found out. If you like us, give us likes, give us reviews, join our Facebook. I'm going to pass it over to Tammy.
Subscribe to our YouTube. Leave comments. Like us. Subscribe. All that good stuff.
Give us in the comments, when we post this on YouTube, give us in the comments, go ahead and put ideas for shows that you're maybe interested in that you want us to do. We'll read them, and we'll comment, and we'll respond.
And Victor's working on having people call in and give us their stories. So we're still working on that stuff.
Yes.
So let us know. And as always, thank you for listening. Good night.
Good night, everybody.